Alrighty, since we have finished up our brain candy, what we have planned for today is we are going to be finishing up the Founding a New Nation slides. If you want to go ahead and head over to Google Classroom and get that open for me, we will be picking up where we left off yesterday on slide number 18. Again, the Founding a New Nation slides on Classroom, and we are picking up on slide 18. If you were out yesterday, please do not forget to go back and review slides 1 through 17. Give you a few moments to do that before we go ahead and get started. Alrighty, so yesterday, we talked about the different compromises that were made in order to pass the second national constitution of the United States that would eventually become the constitution that we know of today. So, the intent of the Constitution was to create what we today call a republican form of government, a form of government in which citizens vote for representatives that represent their opinion within the national government. At the same time, by strengthening the federal government and bringing all the states, at this time only 13, together under one umbrella. This Constitution is obviously much more successful than the Articles of Confederation. It has lasted since 1789, whereas the Articles of Confederation lasted only a little more than 10 years. So, what we're going to be doing today is we are going to be talking about the different principles that truly make our Constitution long lasting. And I would say this is probably a good intro to something you're going to be doing next year in your 12th grade government class as well. We're going to be discussing today 7 principles that have pretty much made our Constitution as long lasting as it is. Those being popular sovereignty, representative government, federalism, the idea of separation of powers, checks and balances, limited government, as well as individual rights. We're going to look at them in that order. So, popular sovereignty is the idea that governments cannot exist without people. Without people, there would be no reason for government. Government is supposed to maintain peace among the masses. So, in other words, with popular sovereignty, the power of that authority figure, the government, comes directly from the people it governs. The Constitution begins and creates this idea when it says, we the people. This states, more or less, that the Constitution was created by the people and it was created for the people. And as a result, the power of the government, whether it's at the national scale or on a state scale, in reality comes from individual citizens. This also means that people have the right to both create, change, or even end the government that exists over them. And this idea was a key principle that was maintained throughout the creation of the U.S. Constitution by many of the founding fathers, the people that helped found this nation and the Constitution that still governs us today. Another one of these principles is representative government. This is the type of government that you live in, and it is also known as a republic. In a representative form of government, voters do not have to vote for every single law. It would take up so much of your time that you would not have time for your family, for your actual real job. That form of democracy only works in very small settings. So instead, with representative government, you as a voter vote for representatives, elected officials that go and they create the laws and the rules for you. State legislatures originally kind of were the people that voted for senators and even in some cases House members in our Congress. However, today, most U.S. senators are kind of chosen through a merit system. They're still kind of pushed forward by state legislatures, but today you actually have the ability to vote on both U.S. senators from your state. You have 2, no matter what state you live in, and they are elected for 6-year terms. and then House of Representatives members, which are determined again by the population of the state, and you vote for those every 2 years. Now, the president is also kind of in this representative government as well, but it's a little bit more complicated. Yes, if you vote for the president, you are voting for a candidate, but in a sense, you're actually voting for another representative that is a member of something called the Electoral College to vote for you. This system creates an indirect form of democracy where you as a citizen still hold power, but every single person holds that same amount of power. And it does, again, give you the ability to live your day-to-day lives without having to vote on every single minute thing that goes on within our federal and state governments. Our third principle is federalism. This is a really cool concept, and we as a nation were the first that practiced this. What it did is it created a system in which you had a national government that oversees the entire country, state governments that control certain regions of the country, and then even smaller local governments that control towns, counties, cities, etc. Now, this did, in a sense, take a lot of the power that states had under the Articles of Confederation away. However, it honestly balanced out quite a bit. Whether it's at a national scale, state, or local, it did create a system of what we call checks and balances, which is another principle we'll discuss in a second, that maintains that kind of power struggle in what we hope to be a positive manner. Now, obviously, that has not always been the case, as with the Civil War, which we will talk about in just a few days. Another key principle of the Constitution is the idea of separation of powers, the idea that we should not have one person or one group within the government having too much power. We do this by separating the power of government into three branches: a legislative branch, which makes laws, an executive branch that carries out and enforces the laws, and then a judicial branch that evaluates those laws to make sure that they're actually legal based on our Constitution in the first place. Each of these branches of government have checks and balances that make sure that neither one or the other, opposite of them, ever have too much power. And this, again, was established to make sure that we did not have a king or what is referred to as an oligarchy, and that we would maintain a democracy. And it has worked, as we are one of the oldest democracies in the world today. We talked about checks and balances just a few moments ago with federalism. But actually, among the separation of powers within these three branches, there are also checks and balances as well. So there are checks and balances between the federal, state, and local governments, as well as between the legislative, executive, and judicial branches. More or less what this says is that each branch of government and every form of government, whether federal, state, or local, have specific powers, and they have the ability to check the actions of others so that they never become too powerful. Again, this is more or less set in place to avoid a king. It makes sense. I mean, Americans fought a Revolutionary War against a constitutional monarchy in which a king was subjugating them. So it would make sense that they would work to their fullest to make sure that a king was never in power within our country. The seventh of our principles is limited government. This kind of goes hand in hand with popular sovereignty in that the Constitution definitely restricts the power of government officials. Just like an ordinary citizen, whether you're a president or a legislature or a Supreme Court justice, every member of our society is required to follow the same laws, and nobody is above the law. They are all subject to the same punishments, no matter who or what they are. And the final of our seven did come with the Bill of Rights that the Anti-Federalists fought so hard to have added to our Constitution. Individual rights are certain things that are promised to citizens that the government is obligated to protect no matter what. These rights are meant to protect citizens against a government overreaching their power and subjugating their own citizens. In other words, this is a principle that maintains our democracy and your protections as an individual citizen against your government. So, why is this Constitution so important for us to discuss? Well, that would be because it's still around today. This is the oldest form of democracy in the world, and it does work. It has its ups and downs, but overall, it has been extremely influential around the world. In the years following the creation of our Constitution, many other nations in Europe and in Latin America would adopt similar democratic forms of government, republic governments, and it has been a foundation for the spread of democracy throughout the world. We were one of the first nations that challenged the monarchy model that had existed for hundreds of years, and it did find some success, and it influenced other nations to do the same. So, the last thing I'm going to leave you off with today is this question. In what ways did the U.S. Constitution improve upon the Articles of Confederation? I would like for you to discuss that with a neighbor for a minute or two, and hopefully, somebody gives you an idea that maybe you didn't already have. Okay, well, that is going to be it for your lesson today. As a reminder, we are going to be working on our presidential poster projects today. The due date for those is coming up, so please make sure that you are using your time wisely. They are due Monday, September the 15th, and I will be returning to see you all on the 16th, so make sure that you are trying to get those in for me.